Hello, Aurora. Welcome.
How are you doing? Nice to see you again, Neil and Bruce.
There we go. Welcome. Your presentation's ready to go. My pleasure to introduce Aurora Davidson, CEO of Amerigo Resources, trading on the TSX under the symbol ARG. And let's just jump right into it, Aurora.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here and telling you a little bit about our story at Amerigo Resources. We are a copper producer, but we're not a typical copper producer. We do a very different job at producing copper by transforming essentially environmental liabilities into an economic asset. What we do is that we process tailings, which are the end product of a mining process, and extract further copper and also some molybdenum and produce copper concentrates, molybdenum concentrates as part of our process. We have been doing this for a number of years, so we call ourselves essentially a profitable long-term copper producer with an operation in Chile. That's our forward-looking statements. So who we are and what do we do? We consider ourselves to be more of a mine, more of a copper factory than a mine, because as I mentioned earlier, we do not have the traditional mining process of having to, explore and maintain a resource from which we extract the ore. We have in substitution of having a resource, what we have is a contract, a contractual agreement with the world's biggest copper producer, which is Codelco, by the means of which we have the rights to process all of the tailings from Codelco's biggest mine, which is called El Teniente, and which is the world's largest copper producer. So in essence, we have a contract that runs currently until 2037 that gives us the right to process this tailings, and from that we produce copper. So we essentially have a traditional mining concentrator that receives the tailings and runs a typical mining process of classification, grinding, flotation, and drying to produce a copper concentrate that is sold back to Codelco. In that sense, we are essentially a copper factory. Why do we say that we are a historical copper producer? We have been doing this uninterruptedly at our operation in Chile since 1992. It's a long and successful track record that has survived a number of copper cycles already, and the operations have grown and have been uninterrupted since 1992. We also have a long-term growth strategy with a focus on shareholder value, essentially by replicating the successful model that we have developed in Chile, and we will see that in some of our next slides. So this is an aerial view of our operation in Chile. As I mentioned, we have the rights to process the fresh tailings, that is the tailings that come from the daily production of El Teniente. And we also have the rights to process historical tailings deposits. This is a view of how we do that. We have kilometers of dry tailings that have been deposited from 1935 to 1986 available to be processed. And we blast them with high water pressure monitors in order to create a slurry that we transport to our mining facility. Amerigo purchased this operation in Chile in 2003 when we were producing 26 million pounds of copper on an annual basis. Since then, we have carried out a series of expansions and plant improvements in order to increase production. Our production was 55 million pounds of copper in 2020. And for this year, we have a guidance of copper production of more than 60 million pounds of copper. We announced our third quarter results in September. And we are essentially trending over our guidance by in Q3 we were 9% over guidance, and we expect to meet this guidance of 60 million pounds in the year 2021. So how we produce our copper is a very traditional low risk process. You can see in that photograph how we are essentially creating a slurry. It's transported to our tailings facility, to our processing plant. And another aspect of significance of our operation is that we don't retain ownership of the tailings, which also sets us apart from other mining operations. We essentially are just a bypass operation that has temporary use of the tailings in order to extract further copper and molybdenum, and then we return those tailings to Codelco, who has the responsibility of holding them on a long-term basis. One of the aspects of our operation that is also quite unique and has a very distinctive ESG angle is the fact that we are producing copper with all clean energy. We locked in a long-term power supply agreement that essentially gives us guaranteed power supply from 2020 until 2037. And it does so through clean power in Chile. And it also provides a significant benefit, which is that it locks in the tariff at which power is supplied to our operation. This is fairly significant because power represents 1/3 of our operating costs once you exclude depreciation. So having a cost protection on your single most significant cost component essentially is of significant importance to guarantee margins on a going forward basis. A lot of people ask me, why is Codelco not processing the whole process and takes care of their own tailings rather than giving you the tailings and providing you with that material that contains essentially 60 million pounds of copper a year? And the reason is the focus on volume that they have. They are a significant volume operation. They're focusing on maximizing their throughput. And in a mining operation, when you're focusing on volume, you necessarily have to give up on recovery. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. So what we do essentially is focus on recovering that copper that has been left on the tailings. It's low grade by definition. You cannot expect tailings to have a high amount of copper content, but we have perfected our operation in order to make it essentially quite profitable by focusing on recovering that additional copper material. Now, having Codelco as our partner in this process is quite significant, given that Codelco is the world's largest and strongest copper partner one could have. They have 11% of global copper production, 10% of known reserves. So they're significant, and it has given us a substantial advantage in our operations in Chile to be partnered with Codelco. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, MVC has the contractual rights to El Teniente's tailings. And what Codelco gets in return for providing those tailings to Amerigo is a royalty. They get a royalty based on production and copper price, and we can take a look at how that is structured as we progress through the presentation. But that gives them an economic participation in the business. Essentially, 50% of the business is distributed back to Codelco through this royalty. Codelco also gets to report the MVC production as their own. We represent anywhere from 9 to 10% of their production on a yearly basis, so that is significant. And we are providing a material reduction of environmental footprint by providing them with cleaner tailings and by moving some of their historical tailings from a known site into a more modern tailings deposit. Our business model is really very, very simple. It has been built on Amerigo having invested more than $300 million at MVC since 2003 in order to ramp up production to our current levels. We do not require additional investment at MVC to sustain a production capacity. The money that needed to be spent has already been spent. And what we do is we maximize our production by managing a mix of fresh and historic tailings. The other side of our business is that we also manage costs in order to maximize margin. As I mentioned, we have price protected our single most significant cost, which is power, and that brings an additional and significant level of certainty to our business modeling going forward. And our operation does not require a significant amount of sustaining capex. We estimate that on a normal year, sustaining capex are about $6 million a year, which is quite low compared to what a mining operation of comparable production metrics requires in respect of sustaining capex. Now, Amerigo is a pure copper play. We survive under low copper prices, but we really do very, very well when copper prices start to trend anywhere over $3. This is the projection of EBITDA that we have for 2021 with our guidance of production of 61 million pounds of copper. You can see that at a copper price of $3, projected EBITDA was $37 million. And the higher the copper price, obviously, the more accretive the business is. Copper prices for the first 9 months of the year average $4.17. Copper prices are today at $4.53 per pound. So you can see how significant the cash generation capacity of Amerigo is under robust copper prices. Just to give an example and comparatives between these projected numbers and what we have publicly disclosed for the 6 first months of the year, we had net income of $23 million US. Our EBITDA for the 6 first months of the year was $47 million. We had earnings per share of 12 cents US, which is 16 cents Canadian. So we are a company that really aligns and starts generating a significant amount of free operating cash flow with robust copper prices. The success of the model that we have developed at our operation at MVC is essentially a plate that can be replicated in a rinse and repeat model. We are essentially resolving or addressing a major environmental issue that every mine in the world has, which is what to do with your tailings. Tailings have the potential of transitioning from being, the unwanted but unavoidable byproduct of mining to becoming a source of additional economic value when you start looking at how you can recover additional material, in our case copper, from those tailings. If we look at the MVC business model and how it has proven itself through time in a very robust way, we see that there are potential opportunities for us to replicate this business model in different ways. In the more near-term arena, we are looking at continuing our relationship with Codelco and in particular with El Teniente by tapping into additional historical tailings deposits to which we don't yet have the contractual rights. We've done this in the past. We have also grown our relationship with Codelco, bringing it from a relationship that used to end in 2021 to a relationship that has been extended to 2037. So we see that there are still significant potentials of additional opportunities for growth within our existing contractual agreement with El Teniente. Now, having said that, Codelco has 6 other mines, and none of them have yet any other tailings reprocessing opportunities similar to what we have at MVC. So the potential to replicate a similar model within the Codelco organization is significant to us. And beyond the Codelco umbrella, we could also be looking at doing a similar arrangement to what we have at MVC with other major copper tailings deposits, particularly in Chile. We have been operating in Chile. We have a thorough knowledge of the Chilean landscape in terms of its mining regulations, business regulations, networking, etc. So we see that Chile would be the next logical space where growth opportunities would be available for Amerigo. With respect to the ESG component, we tick it on a number of fronts. First of all, I mentioned we are a renewable powered operation. That is fairly unusual within the mining industry yet. A lot of mining companies aim to be green powered, but are not there yet. We are. And we're producing copper, which is the pillar of the green economy and a significant commodity in the world's goals towards decarbonization. Our operations, by definition, minimize environmental impact. We are a true participant of the circular economy by essentially tapping into waste material and generating substantial economic benefit out of that processing. And we reduce tailings footprints and environmental risk in the process of carrying out our production processes. We see that copper is entering a bullish cycle. You can read a lot about this online. There is a significant drive towards decarbonization on a worldwide basis. Copper will be absolutely needed in order to build a greener, cleaner world. Sustainable energy sources such as solar, wind, geothermal will support a surge in copper demand. Governments are looking at sourcing copper as a critical element, a critical sourcing. And the green demand in this decade is expected to be higher, to surpass the demand of copper that we saw coming exclusively from China in the 2000s. This could well be the strongest growth in global copper demand in history, and we are extremely well positioned at our operation in MVC to benefit from this cycle. In terms of capitalization, Amerigo has gone through a significant change in this year. We started the year being very closely held. 65% of our stock was held essentially in 5 hands plus management. A lot of our work in the year has been focused on telling our story, getting to the market to become more familiar with what we're doing, the results that we're obtaining. And this has allowed us to essentially unlock some prior blocks of shares and moved on to a more widely held stock. At present time, about 41% of our stock is still held by insiders, but the majority of the stock has now transitioned into the public float. And we have 181 million shares outstanding. One of the aspects that we've undertaken this year has been to put out a payout policy. We announced that at the end of September. We currently have a substantial issuer bid to retire up to $25 million in the share capital of the company, which would represent about 11% of the issued and outstanding. And we also announced the reinstatement of dividends commencing in Q4 of this year. Amerigo used to be a significant dividend payer in the prior commodity cycle. We paid in excess of $47 million in dividends, and we are returning to dividend payment mode. Starting this quarter, we will be announcing our Q3 financial results and dividend announcement on November the 3rd. So why invest in Amerigo? As I mentioned, we have a substantial return of capital to shareholders. We have initiated or reinitiated a dividend policy. We are a pure copper play producer that is highly levered to copper prices. We have low capex, predictable EBITDA and cash flow. We're strategically positioned in the world's largest copper producing region. And we have a unique story of environmentally producing copper in a sustainable way with significant growth opportunities throughout Chile. Our appendices to our presentation basically show how the royalty to El Teniente is structured. I mentioned today that 453 is the copper price today. So let's take 460 as an example. El Teniente gets $1.44 per pound of copper under those circumstances. We also produce moly. Moly prices have been behaving quite well this year, close to the $19 per pound range. And essentially that gives us some additional gravy to benefit from. But of course, our focus and our line of business is essentially copper. Moly is just a nice add-on to have. So that would be the presentation. Running out of time here, Neil, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Aurora. That was a wonderful presentation. Yeah, copper is going to be hot for many, 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 many years.